India-Nepal relations. Analyze the statement in light of recent developments in India-Nepal relations. 250 words. Background: India has age-old, unique, time-tested ties of friendship with Nepal. The relationship between the two countries is deeply and intricately intertwined by geography, civilizational bonds, and cultural and social enmeshing. However, the role of China in Nepal is raising multiple questions. Recent issues between India and Nepal which led China into the picture. There is a persistent perception among a large section of Nepalis that India was primarily responsible for the 5-month blockade of the Indo-Nepal border in 2015-16, which caused such hardship for common Nepalis. Above Kalakani, there is no demarcation of the boundary between India and Nepal till China border. This could lead to problems in the coming time. After Doklam, Arad is very concerned about Kalakani dispute. It may provide an opportunity for China to flare up the issue along with a communist government in Nepal. China, meanwhile, in a departure from its strictly hands-off approach in Nepal, started lobbying in Kathmandu for the continuation of the Oli government, with whom Beijing had signed a slew of bilateral agreements in March 2016. Military: China invested heavily in Nepal's security forces, particularly in its police and paramilitary forces. It even opened up a police academy to train the APF, the Nepali paramilitary force deployed to guard the Nepal-Tibet border, in order to check the possible infiltration of Free Tibet activists into Nepal. China rethinking its Nepal policy with the recently announced military drills between the Chinese People's Liberation Army (PLA) and Nepal Army, the first ever between the two countries. Before this, Nepal Army had conducted such drills only with the US and Indian armies. After the Doklam crisis, China is getting more aggressive in creating strategic challenges for India in Nepal. 110. www.insightsinIndia.com secure synopsis. Nepal has opened floodgates for the Chinese to operate in all sensitive areas, including Kathmandu, Pokhara, and down up to Lumbini, which is just 25 kilometers from the Indian border. China's activities have been steadily expanding in Nepal after Kathmandu's support for ODE materialized. Economic: Nepal and China also signed a bilateral assistance agreement worth 1 billion RMB $145 million. Most of this money will go into post-earthquake reconstruction and upgrading Nepal-China road links. Last year, Nepal played host to the first ever Nepal-China think tank conference, where experts from various fields in China listed the great benefit Nepal would be entitled to if it embraced the One Belt, One Road idea. When New Delhi imposed an undeclared border blockade against Nepal in 2015-16, Oli signed watershed trade and transit framework agreements with China. For the first time, Nepal could now import its oil from China and use Chinese roads, railways, and ports for third-country trade. Recently, 10 agreements were signed between the two countries. The one related to trade and transit and the other on connectivity have attracted international attention for their security implication in the South Asian region. As per the transit treaty with China, Nepal has now secured transit rights for trade with third countries through the Chinese territory. China decided to supply petroleum products to Nepal, apart from building petroleum storage facilities in this country. Cultural diplomacy: since the blockade, besides stepping up security cooperation, the Chinese government has ramped up its cultural diplomacy with Nepal as well. For instance, it has recently started teaching Chinese to Nepali tourism professionals. China is also encouraging more of its citizens to visit Nepal and has announced that 2017 will be Nepal tourism promotion year. India-Nepal relationship is strong. China's role is only minimal because trade through China to Nepal has many technical as well practical problems. First, building such a railway track across the tallest mountains of the world would be a very costly affair. This is over and above the steep environmental and socio-economic challenges to be faced especially by Nepal. Arad has always stood up with Nepal in the moment of crisis. India was the first responder after the devastating earthquake in Nepal, with the Indian government mobilizing resources and manpower to ensure relief reached the spot within hours. Besides, India and Nepal are seen to share a special relationship, with an open border and Nepalese nationals living and working in India, besides being welcome to serve in the Indian Army. 12-point joint statement was issued recently highlighting the resolve of the countries to take their bilateral relations to newer heights on the basis of equality, mutual trust, respect and benefit. 3 agreements on a rail project connecting an Indian border town with Kathmandu, on inland waterways connectivity and on agricultural development in Nepal, were signed. How to strengthen the relationship. Completion of the ongoing process of updating the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. India must recognize that, as in all other developing economies, Nepal's aspirational young population is also looking beyond the open Indian border for opportunities, and its desire to turn his landlocked country into a land-linked country with a merchant navy must be considered positively. People-to-people interdependence must lead the relationship along with civil society and business commercial level interactions. 111. www.insightsindia.com Secure synopsis. India's major foray should be in innovation and technology iron bar, multidisciplinary dialogues, educational and technical institutions, local and global migration management and skills and capacity building. India needs to finish the infrastructure projects on time. For instance, Panchetwar project has been pending for over 20 years now. Nepal could be the fountainhead of climate change knowledge and connect to India's larger dynamics of the management of the ecology of hills and mountains. Q. The Simla Agreement was much more than a peace treaty seeking to reverse the consequences of the 1971 war. Comment. 250 words. Background: the 1971 India-Pakistan War and the Shimla Agreement of 1972 are some of the most important events of the 20th century history of the Indian subcontinent. The decisions taken/not taken at Shimla continue to affect the Indian subcontinent, and even more importantly, the rationale, mindsets and logic on display then continues to be part of Indian decision-making on war and peace even years after the event. Shimla Agreement. Shimla Agreement was signed between India and Pakistan. Main agenda at Shimla was to deal with the aftermath of the 1971 war and usher in durable peace between India and Pakistan. The following principles of the agreement also show that it was a peace treaty: a mutual commitment to the peaceful resolution of all issues through direct bilateral approaches to build the foundations of a cooperative relationship with special focus on people-to-people contacts to uphold the inviolability of the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir, which is a most important CDM between India and Pakistan, and a key to durable peace. Now, it was much more than a peace treaty. It was a comprehensive blueprint for good neighborly relations between India and Pakistan. Under the Shimla Agreement, both countries undertook to abjure conflict and confrontation which had marred relations in the past, and to work towards the establishment of durable peace, friendship and cooperation. The Shimla Agreement contains a set of guiding principles, mutually agreed by both the countries while managing relations with each other. These emphasize respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, respect for each other's unity, political independence, sovereign equality, and abjuring hostile propaganda. 2 countries are resolved to settle their differences by peaceful means through bilateral negotiations or by any other peaceful means mutually agreed upon between them. In order progressively to restore and normalize relations between the 2 countries step by step, it was agreed that steps shall be taken to resume communications, postal, telegraphic, sea, land including border posts, and air links including overflights. Trade and cooperation in economic and other agreed fields will be resumed as far as possible. Exchange in the fields of science and culture will be promoted. Conclusion. 112. www.insightsindia.com Secure synopsis. Even though the agreement was in the interests of bringing peace in the relations of both the countries, it adversely impacted the future of Kashmir, and despite being in a winning position, India could not use its diplomacy to the mark. Q critically examined how far India has managed to fulfill its national interests through the exercise of its foreign policy. Discuss in light of the overall objectives of India's foreign policy. 250 words. Background: foreign policy is a strong determinant that marks the state's position, capability and credibility with other states, in the region and in the international community. The significance of analyzing this determinant to be as a failure or success being the byproduct of states is to make people realize the limitations, stakes and transitional impacts that are related with this one determinant. The objectives of India's foreign policy. National interest has been the governing principle of India's foreign policy even at the time of Nehru, who was inspired by the ideal of world peace. toleration and mutual respect among nations. In operational terms, the idea of national interest takes the form of concrete objectives of foreign policy. The foreign policy of India also aims at maintaining international peace and security, to oppose imperialism, to stand against the apartheid policy, to propagate the peaceful and political settlement of international disputes, to foster peaceful coexistence, to remain non-aligned and non-committed, and to maintain the unity and solidarity of the Third World, ensure all-pervasive national economic development, and to expand the area of external trade as well as of accelerating the pace of development. Settle international disputes through peaceful means. Principle of Panchashila, which spoke of mutual respect of the state for one another's geographical solidarity and sovereignty, mutual agreement for not to interfere in each other's internal affairs, maintenance of equality, providing mutual advantages to each other, and maintenance of peaceful coexistence. Gujral Doctrine. Gujral Doctrine was a 5-point road map which sought to build trust between India and neighbors, of solution to bilateral issues through bilateral talks, and to remove immediate quid pro quos in diplomatic relationship between India and her neighbors. Devil Doctrine, which has come to stand for a fear-evoking, no-mercy policy towards terrorists and the deployment of a hard-line this neighbors with expansionist tendencies. Dehyphenation recently in the approach towards Israel and Palestine. How India achieved national interests through its foreign policy. International role. India has played an active role in the deliberations of the United Nations on the creation of a more equitable international economic order. India raised the issues such as end of colonialism and apartheid, sovereign equality of all nations, collective self-reliance of developing countries, and democratization of international. 113. www.insightsindia.com secure synopsis. Institutions. These issues were of vital importance to newly liberated developing countries. Policy of non-alignment also enabled India to play a constructive role in disarmament and world peace, which were required for the peaceful development of third world countries. Regional cooperation. An important achievement of India's foreign policy has been the promotion of regional cooperation in South Asia. India is an active member of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation SAARC, and East Asia Summit, etc. India has also emerged as the leading player in the global affairs. It has joined new global groups like G20, IBSA, and BRICS, which gives more scope to India to play a larger role in global affairs. Sharing of Ganga water with Bangladesh. It is in pursuance of Gujral Doctrine that late in 1996 India concluded an agreement with Bangladesh on sharing of Ganga waters. This agreement enabled Bangladesh to draw in clean seas and slightly more water than even the 1977 agreement had provided. Military. India succeeded in developing friendly relations with other neighboring countries and was instrumental in the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971. This increased India's reputation connectivity for linking India better, especially the northeastern regions. India is implementing projects like Trilateral Highway, BBIN Corridor, and good relations with the sea and with the peace policy. Nuclear agreements. While India has, and will, remain committed to nuclear disarmament, to be achieved in a time-bound framework, it has consistently and in the principled manner opposed such discriminatory treaties as the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT) and Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty (CTBT), and has refused to give up its nuclear options until all countries in the world, including nuclear weapon states, embrace the idea of universal nuclear disarmament in a phased trade and economic growth. India has since the start been wise enough to utilize its geostrategic location to trade and enhance trade. The new economic policy, 1991, based on liberalization and privatization, was in response to cope with the emerging global economic order brought out by the process of globalization. It protects its interests of free trade via WTO forums. Social. India has also played a responsible role with respect to other issues of such as environmentally sustainable development, protection of human rights, at various international forums. Failures. Neighborhood countries. However, India's defeat in 1962 against China was a setback to India's policy of friendly relations with neighboring countries. Border disputes have not been settled yet, leading to unrest across the border, impacting Indian economy as well. India does not interfere in other countries' internal affairs, which makes it not taking any strained decisions related to Syrian civil war, refugee crisis, etc. India's stand on terrorism could not be converted into convention internationally. SAARC growth is stagnated due to India-Pakistan rivalry. The One Belt One Road policy of China is considered as one of the failures of Indian foreign policy at WTO. There is a stalemate between developed and developing countries regarding food security. 114. www.insightsindia.com secure synopsis. The non-alignment motive of India is questioned after India signed LDMOA with US. The social development has not improved dramatically despite India being one of the fastest economies. Human development indicators like malnutrition, poverty are still rampant in India. Conclusion: principal criterion in the conduct of foreign policy for India ought to be lifting the poor from poverty. So India's policy's single-minded focus should be on economic development. Without the necessary economic strength, India cannot strengthen its military. Q.